I never thought I'd end up working in a morgue. At first, it was just another job, nothing too exciting. But as the days passed, I began to notice something strange about the atmosphere. The constant cold, the smell of formaldehyde in the air, and the feeling that time didn't seem to move in that place. I was there to take care of the bodies, to keep everything in order. But what happened next turned everything into a nightmare. I don't know what was going on, but something was definitely wrong. At first, I just did my job, storing the bodies and doing the regular checks. But over time, I started noticing something odd. Every time I went back to the body fridge, something seemed off. It was a strange feeling, like things weren't in the same place. I thought maybe I was just imagining things. But it kept happening, and soon I started questioning if I was losing my mind or if something else was going on. The first time I noticed something really strange was when I went into the morgue, like I always did, and saw that one of the bodies was in a different position. It had been lying on its back, but when I opened the fridge door, it was turned to the side with its head facing me. I froze for a moment. I couldn't understand what was happening. Maybe a colleague had moved the body, I thought, but no one else was there. It was late, and I was alone. I tried to ignore what I saw, trying to rationalize it as a mistake on my part. But the next night, when I returned to the morgue, things got worse. The body that had been turned on its side the night before was now sitting up, with its eyes half open. I stared at the body for a long time, a chill running up my spine. This couldn't be real. How could this happen? I started to believe I was going crazy, but the feeling of being watched was just too strong. The next night, the bodies were in even stranger positions. Some were almost lying down, but with their arms stretched out, as if they were trying to get up. I started to feel an overwhelming sense of dread, like I was in the middle of something I couldn't understand. I wondered if I was just imagining it, but with each visit, it became harder to ignore. The bodies weren't moving by themselves, but their positions were impossible to ignore. It was then that I started noticing even more disturbing details. The eyes of the bodies, which had previously seemed fixed, were now almost always turned toward me. The first time I noticed this, a shiver ran down my spine. I knew I was becoming paranoid, I knew that. But there was something in the air, something I couldn't pinpoint, that told me I wasn't alone. It felt like someone, or something, was always watching me, following every move I made. The situation only worsened each night I returned. I tried to rationalize everything, telling myself that my mind was just playing tricks on me. But the truth was, every time I went back to the morgue, the bodies seemed more alive. It was like they were trying to communicate, trying to do something, but I couldn't understand what. I was so uncomfortable that on the last few nights, I even considered not going back. But something forced me to. Something I couldn't explain. And then on a particularly strange night, it happened. When I opened the fridge door, the body I'd seen several times before was completely out of place. It wasn't lying down, it wasn't sitting up, it was standing. Its head was slightly tilted forward, eyes fixed on me. I froze, panic overwhelming me. How was this possible? I knew there was no one else in the morgue but me. I looked around, and the feeling that something else was there, something invisible, made me freeze in place. I tried to convince myself that it was all just a nightmare, that I was delusional. But deep down, I knew that what was happening wasn't normal. When I looked at the other bodies, I saw that some of them had their hands stretched out, like they were trying to get off the metal table. The feeling of being watched intensified with every passing second. And the worst part was, I didn't know what was happening anymore. The fear of losing control took over me, and I knew I couldn't go on like this. After that night, I tried to avoid the morgue for a few days. The thought of going back there, seeing the bodies in impossible positions, made me nervous and completely unfocused. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. Something told me that if I didn't go back soon, things would only get worse. The fear of something worse happening if I didn't go back forced me to return, even though I had no idea what was waiting for me. When I entered the morgue again, I realized the atmosphere was different. The smell was stronger, the air seemed thicker, and the sounds in the room felt muffled. I looked at the bodies, and as expected, some were in strange positions. But what made me freeze with fear was the body on the last metal table. It was facing me, its eyes fixed on me. I didn't know whether to approach or run away. There was something in those eyes that told me I was in danger. It was at that moment I began to notice something I hadn't before. Some of the clothes on the bodies were out of place, as if they had been touched or moved. I went up to one of the bodies and saw that on its arms there were finger marks, as if someone had tried to touch it, or worse, as if it had tried to get up. Fear took over me, and for the first time, I truly began to believe that something supernatural was happening there. It couldn't all just be my imagination. That night, I decided to run out of the morgue. I knew that whatever was going on was beyond my understanding, beyond what I should try to deal with. I tried to forget about it, telling myself I would never go back to that place. But the fear kept haunting me. Sometimes during the day when I was in the hospital, I'd feel a sense of panic, like I was being pulled back to that place. Like something was watching me, waiting for the right moment to act. I tried to live my life normally, but the feeling that something was watching me never went away. Even when I was at home, I had the sensation that I wasn't alone. I knew the morgue wasn't the only place where strange things were happening, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something I couldn't ignore anymore. After a few weeks, the hospital made some changes to the morgue staff, and as a sort of relief, I was transferred to another department. I tried to move on, but what happened in the morgue never left my mind. I tried to rationalize it all, but the truth is, I never managed to forget what I saw. The bodies, the impossible positions, the eyes that watched me to this day. I wonder if I'll ever understand what happened in that morgue. I never went back, and I don't know if I ever will. But to this day, I still get chills whenever I think about that place. Something tells me that the things I saw weren't just coincidences. I don't know what happened, but the fact that I don't have answers, that I can't explain any of it, is what scares me the most. The only thing I know is that, no matter how hard I try, the fear never left me. And no matter how hard I try to forget, I can't.